Hey y'all, hey, Dr. Heather Robinson here with Educators Rise Enterprises. How y'all doing today? Happy Friday. All right, so I'm back at it again. Y'all know the routine. We are doing a live interview with one of my fabulous co-authors. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before she hops on. Give a couple people a little bit more time to get on. I know Friday afternoons, early afternoons are tough for people, so a lot of you will probably be catching the replay. This will be on Facebook, but it will also be on my YouTube channel, which is also under Educators Rise Enterprises. All right, so without further ado, Martiesa Smith is an educator, an advocate. She deals in special education. She's an entrepreneur. She's an author. She has her hands in a lot of different things. I'm not going to give too much of her backstory because I want to give her an opportunity to share about herself. I see her on now. All right, I'm going to let a few more people come in. As they are coming in, I'm going to see where she is. Let's in while we are waiting for her on. Oh, there she is. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Welcome. As you know, this is new. This is not something that I've done before. This is the first of the 3 anthologies that I've done this. So we're just going to hop right on in. And Marty, tell us about yourself.
Hi, welcome everybody. I am Martiesa Smith. I am a special education educator. I have worked in the field for over 20 years. I've also worked with mental health. I am a co-author, thank you, Ms. For Volume 3 of Educator Rise. And I just love what I do, honestly. I love working in the environment I work in. I love working with my special education babies, just to make sure that they receive what they need as well as everyone else.
Fabulous. So in that vein, can you tell us a little bit about your educational journey and what inspired you to pursue a career in special education specifically?
Okay. So around 2020, I think it was, I was working in the mental health field, working what I would call overworking. My last son was a senior in high school, so I said I want to start working smarter, not harder. And so I went into education. So I left a job making quite a bit to go to a job as a paraprofessional when I started out, which took my income down to a minimum. But however, because I love what I do, money wasn't a factor for me. So I started at the high school here where I'm from. And probably about 3 months in, I guess, the special education director came to me and asked me if I would go and work with this one student. And so I agreed to it, didn't know what I was getting into. So I agreed, and I went from the high school to the elementary. And of course, you know, here in Texas, when you work with special education, there has to be a certified special education teacher that comes in to teach the students. That wasn't what I received. So I was in a classroom with 4 students that was assigned to me, all under the SPED, Special Education Services. But I didn't have a teacher coming into the classroom. So I was like, okay, if this is what I'm going to do, and this is where I plan to be for probably retirement, then I'll go and get myself educated. So I went and pursued my second master's, which is in special education, and took the journey to become educated so that I can actually give the special education students that I was working with the full services that they deserve to have. And so I graduated last December, December, my master's in special education. And right after that, I went in applying for my doctoral degree in global leadership. So I am working on a doctoral degree in education, but it's global leadership because I want to be able to service students at an early catch for if there's any type of learning disability that they are experiencing or the parent has recognized but do not know how to pursue, you know, getting it addressed. So that's how I pretty much got into the education environment.
I love that, especially as somebody that had an IEP coming up with 5 different sections. It definitely does take a village, and it does take catching things before they go too far, so to speak. But you have a very interesting mantra. Can you share your mantra?
So my mantra talks about seeing things, and seeing things through the lens of my students, not necessarily from my lens as an educator, but allowing my students to teach me as well as me teaching them. And I find that very interesting because when you work with special education students, um, you can learn a lot from them. You can learn a great deal from them. And so this is where my education journey has become very interesting, because I have been able to learn, or for a better term, my students have educated me, not so much from the book theory with going through college and getting a degree, but they've been able to educate the classroom, based on their specific learning and how they learn, how they communicate, because I work with both verbal and nonverbal. So my students have taught me how to read their body language when there's something they want or something that's going on that they cannot verbally speak to me about. So that's why I chose that as my mantra, because when you look back, the first language you learn is body language. We learn to read body language. Say for instance, if we have an infant baby that's crying, we don't really know what's wrong with that baby because that baby cannot tell us, but we learn through the body language that we're observing and ruling out different things to understand. So that's the same thing I took into my classroom when I work with my students, learning to read through body language. Even if they're verbal and they can talk, I still read the body language, because some students are not going to be very open to talk to you. So you kind of have to figure it out, with the yes and no's, open-ended questions. And then sometimes you have to go with the yes and no with a nod. So it's learning to read the body language. And that's what led me to the mantra that I have.
Very good. You are a huge advocate for education in a lot of different areas, special education, DEI, specifically in the classroom setting. What does authentic inclusion look like?
To me, authentic inclusion looks um, more hands-on, not just being in the classroom with a student, watching them, asking if you need help, if you got it, but being a little bit more hands-on. Because you would have a student that say, yes, they understand, but in the end, they really don't understand. And that could be because while I'm in a classroom setting with others, and I don't want these other students to know that I don't know this, or I don't want to be labeled or bullied or any of that. So I think the authentic inclusion looks like that push in, giving that student that space to become independent, but also making sure that that student is well aware of what it is they're doing, and able to help them hands-on without it looking like, oh, this student don't know, or having to sit them in the back of the classroom or things of that sort. So pushing into the classroom, giving them that hands-on, but also making them feel more independent so they can feel a part of the classroom and they feel like they're on the same level as these other students.
Yes, I believe inclusion is very important, and I believe meeting children where they are and kind of curtailing your technique as an educator, your teaching style and your teaching strategy to meet those individual needs is important. And it is, like you said, it's hands-on. You got to roll your sleeves up and you got to get in there. You can't be afraid to roll your sleeves up. You can't be prissy, if you will, when it comes to that. You got to be okay with getting in the dirt and the muck and the mire. So I wrote down something while you were talking. You specialize in culturally responsive teaching, social emotional learning, and literacy.
Right.
Why are these areas so critical for student success?
And I believe that they're, actually, let me rephrase that. I know that they're important because we work in an environment of cultural diversity. And working in that environment is being mindful that every student is going to learn in a different way, on a different level, based on culture. And so I practice that because whereas in my culture, eye contact is very important. Whereas when I work with other students, eye contact is not of the importance, and it can be looked at as being disrespectful. So this is where I take culture as a top priority to make sure that I'm meeting that student's need, but also I'm respecting their culture as well. So when I have a student, if I'm talking to them and they're not looking at me, giving me eye contact, then I look at that as being a part of their culture. So I find other ways of being able to communicate with this student to make sure that they're still getting what they need. They're still being able to understand, and that the eye contact is not an importance of the situation at hand. It's more so making sure that I'm meeting the student needs and meeting them where they are, and that they are being able to grasp the material, and we can move forward.
That brings me to your organization. Tell us the name of your organization and a little bit about what you do.
So my organization is called New Growth Behavior Council, and I kind of came up with that title because I feel like every day is a new day for us to grow. And so basically, I have a couple of things that I work with under that name. So that's just the big umbrella of the business. However, I focus on individuals who have DWIs. So I do DWI education and intervention, which are two different parts, but it still focuses around DWIs. I focus on social skills. I focus on drugs and marijuana activity. I focus on parenting. One of my biggest parts under that umbrella is the social skills, because we all need to know how to have social skills in any setting, in any environment. That's just a part of everyday life, And so social skills, because I believe that's what gives an individual that growth to be able to move forward and become successful.
Absolutely. It's taking the full child into consideration and not just one aspect. I love that. So going back to the addiction counseling, juvenile justice, special education, you bring a broad background to the table, whether it's in the classroom, in business, in various opportunities. How do these disciplines work together in your approach to supporting students?
With all those that you just spoke about, the juvenile justice and the substance abuse and the education, it all works hand in hand. And I say that because in my doctoral program for the global education leadership, my dissertation topic is focusing on the misconception of students that leads to school to prison pipeline. And so I look at that when we as educators do not understand the behaviors that a student present, and we want to connect, and we want to connect it to one area, but we disconnect it from another area. This is what leads these students or these individuals to the school to prison pipeline. So I connect them all together, looping them one by one, because in order to help an individual, we have to get to the root of the problem. What is the underlying root to why this behavior is presenting itself? Then connect it to the right area. Is it just a form of misconduct in the class because this individual can't have his way? Or is this connected to the disability that this individual may have? And we have just misunderstood it. So we're labeling these students, again, which puts them in the school to prison pipeline, or it increases and intensifies the dropout rate in school, because the student will look at it as, I don't feel comfortable in that room. I'm not in the right setting. It can also go into the racial disparities. So now we have the high dropout rate. So in order to kind of minimize that dropout rate, I'll look for where's the underlying root of the problem. Hey, tell me what's going on. Because necessarily it may not just be in the classroom. It can be on the outside of the classroom. But when I come, I want somebody to understand what it is I'm going through on the outside. So I kind of look in that environment or that area just to say, okay, is this just a true misconduct, or is this because of the student having a disability that we have to connect it to and try to see how to work it out with that individual?
That's a very great connection to inclusion. Everyone wants to feel seen. Everyone wants to feel heard. Everyone wants to feel valued, and they want to feel like they belong. When you feel like you belong, you thrive.
Right.
Adults and students alike. So if we thrive in environments where we feel like we belong and we're valued, we need to also look at students the same way. Like children are the same way. They thrive in environments where they feel like they're valued and they belong. So that's really, really great. I love that example. You talked about pursuing your doctorate degree, which I commend you for doing that, because it's a lot of work.
It
But
is.
what inspired you to continue your education, and what impact do you hope to have after you finish pursuing your doctorates?
Um, always want to have my doctorate has been a long journey for me, or a lifelong thing. And so I think more so what inspired me is looking at the difference between when I came through school, when I was bringing my children to school, and what it looks like now. There is a great difference in education coming, coming down that slope. And so my biggest thing, or my biggest concern or reason, one of the words, for wanting to pursue it is because I just thought that our Black and brown children, it impacts them the most. I was just reading an article online where they're saying that special services have increased, being received versus if you look back a couple of decades. Well, if you go in there and you kind of start sorting out those numbers and categorizing them, the white kids that's receiving it, the brown kids, which would be your Hispanic or minority kids, and then your Black kids receiving special service. Our kids, the Black kids, have the highest number, and then of course your brown kids, which is your minorities, come under that number. So what allowed me to go, or this is what actually told me to go into this area, to kind of find out why are our Black and brown kids receiving the services higher than the white kids. Why is because, going back for an example, when my oldest and my youngest kid was growing up, they wasn't fast talkers. So, I put him in private school, and I'll go to pick him up from school one day, and the teacher tell me that I need to get my baby tested. And I'm like, why? Well, he can't talk. I was like, yes, he can. Well, no, he can't. Very well. He has no problem with talking. So I go in and I start talking to him, and she's like, oh, he can talk. I say it's because he chooses his environment of where he engages. And this is at a young age. So that tells you that even coming in at a young age, 3 years old, these kids are being very mindful of the area that they're in. So just think about a kid who truly cannot talk, but the parent either has not connected with that to get the kid tested, or they're in denial. Oh, he talks when he wants to, because when we talk to these parents and these children are in school, which is one setting, and they're out of school, which is another setting, there's a great difference. So Johnny does everything at home, but then when Johnny gets to school, none of what mom said he could do, he does in the school environment. So it was just connecting those and just making sure that our kids are getting what we need, and we're not overdiagnosing, underdiagnosing, or misdiagnosing our babies in the school setting, because this is what's happening. They are being very either overdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, or even misdiagnosed. And I've also found an article where some students are being intentionally misdiagnosed because the school received funding for that, which
Yeah.
I think impacts our Black kids the most.
So I was sitting as you were talking about your children and talking about teachers. And one of the things I've learned over the last 23 years in education and all the different capacities that I've been in is you have to get to know the student, because sometimes students won't perform for someone they're not familiar with. They have to get comfortable with you. There's a such thing as selective mutism. And I don't know if you've heard of that term. When I was coming up, they didn't call it that, but that's what I had. And what that is I select when I want to talk. I know how to speak,
Right.
but I select when I want to speak. If I'm around strangers and I don't feel comfortable, I'm selecting to be mute. So it is a diagnosis today, but that's not what it was back then. And all it is teachers taking the time to get to know the student and allowing the student to build a level of comfortability.
Right.
So that right there, what you were talking about, made me think of that, because a lot of times children are falling through the cracks for a lot of different reasons. Classrooms are oversaturated, or you have someone that has a caseload that is double or triple of what they're supposed to have, and they don't have the support. There's a lot of different variables to why these things happen. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't justify it. It's just laying out the facts.
Right.
And so I always talk about it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a child. And when I was a child, there was the village of my father, there was the village of my teachers, there was the village of the administrators at my school, there was the village of my IEP team.
Right.
And so they all came together to ensure little old me, I
Right.
was able to get from where I was to where I needed to be. And so they had a vested interest in ensuring that I got to my next. We've gotten so far away from that village. We've gotten so far away from that inclusivity. And there are biases and there's pushback towards this work that we're doing because people don't understand.
Right.
They don't understand that DEI is for the people. They don't understand that it's bigger than just gender, race, creed, and culture. This movement is way bigger than that. And when people start to understand it really and start to actually allow themselves and open themselves up to learning about it, I think that's when we'll see a change as well. Because again, you get a lot of pushback because people think, oh, people just want something on a silver platter and they just want something free. No, because I always share this example. If a white man and a white woman with the same level of education and the same level of experience and the same business acumen and they have the same business reputation go for a job, 9 times out of 10, that white male is going to get that job before that white female. That's just an example of gender, right? And you can give so many more examples. What I want to switch this to is what advice would you give educators and parents who want to create a more inclusive, equitable, and supportive learning environment in the school as well as at home?
My advice would be to any of them, parents, educators. Well, starting out with the educators, my advice would be to them to make sure that you have that strong admin background. Make sure that, you know, when your admin is coming in, that you're not just someone that took a position, because you have admins that are over special education that has no idea what actually happens in special education because that's not their background. You will have an that comes in and they may have taught some other core class, English, math, science, but none of it was related towards the special education side, which is a whole different environment. So when you're going to them and you're calling them in to get advice or bringing up a concern to them, they have no idea what's going on because special education is not their background. So don't have that support that you need. That can be a barrier within itself as far as the educator and how they're producing or how they're being productive in that classroom environment. You know, to the parents, I would say, stay on top of it. Ask for documentation. Ask for proof. Ask for this documentation showing if your child is either progressing or regressing, because a lot of times these students come in, they're in the special education classroom, they're self-contained, and they're not learning. They're not learning. So ask for that documentation, that paper trail, because you are due that, you know, and you should be able to say, okay, I want to have a meeting, you know, to find out where my child stands at this point, to make sure that this child is receiving what they need and they're not just going to school and something is just being written down. Because as we know, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. You know, you can tell me all day long that my child is gone from a C to a C plus, but where's the proof at? You know, where are the work samples? Where's the observation showing that you went in and you observed my child doing this, that, and the other, you know, and it is documented the date and time that it happened. Ask for that documentation. Ask for these meetings. When you go to art meetings, ask for clarification on what they mean, because a lot of times when you're in these art meetings, these educators would talk education language. They're not talking language that a parent needs to understand. So what is an art meeting? What is an IEP? You know, these parents don't understand that. We go in and we document certain things on this paperwork because, wow, that's the educational talk. But do this parent truly understand what this means? No. So you'll get a parent that go in and say, yes, 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 I agree. I'll waive my 5 days. But they have no idea what's going on actually in the environment, because their trust school has their child's back and their best interest. And a lot of times that is not the case. You know, also when we put these teachers in these special education rooms, make sure that's what they want to do. Because working in a special education room, in a self-contained room, is different environment than being in a gen ed area. It takes a special person who really, really, really want to work in this environment and make what they need versus just going out there and saying, okay, Johnny know how to say his ABCs. Yeah, my baby know how to say his ABCs too. And I call them my students my babies because they are. I'm with them 6 hours a week. So those are my babies during that time. From the
That's
time
right.
they from the time they get on that campus to the time they leave that campus, I know they're gone, they're in my care. So I have to make sure that I'm protecting every interest of that student from their head to their feet and everything that falls in between, you know. So I am very overprotective of my students when they're in my classroom. I'm making sure that they get what they need. I reach out to my parents. I keep in contact. You know, a prime example, I had a student in my room. I was in a self-contained room with, I think, about 12 students with 2 parents. And my student was very aggressive. He was very physically aggressive. He was nonverbal. So basically, he would mimic what someone would tell him to say. Very physical, would attack not only my other students, he would attack myself and attack my parents. And so one day I had my parent to sit down with him because he knew his ABC. And I took a book out. And I told her, I say, sit at the table with this book and see what he's going to do. And he read the book. And it was being videoed, but it was, you know, I was recording him from the back so you couldn't see his face. He read that book. And so I sent the recording to his mom, who was very shocked that he could read. And I also sent it to my director. And my director literally turned that back on me, saying that I was recording a kid and tried to use that against me. And I was like, no, it's for the best interest of this student to show the progression that he's making while in this classroom. And it's not always just negative saying, hey, mom, he attacked this student today. Parents want to hear. So yes, Johnny did attack a student, but Johnny sat in and read a book for me as well. So it's showing the positives also with the concerns that you have about the students, because that negative is a regression in the school setting, but that reading that book is a positive in the school setting as well. You know, so I always made sure that when I reached out to my parents, it wasn't because I always had a concern, but I reached out because I had an acclimate for my student because they was able to do certain things that parents didn't even know they could do because this is not something they do at home.
Right. I have a student that I'm going to share about, and it's interesting because in general ed, you will get students that have IEPs, and sometimes the IEP is not always a cognitive thing.
Right.
And a lot of times when I became a teacher that trained other teachers, you would be surprised how many teachers would get an IEP and just kind of tossed it to the side and not even look through it. And so you cannot possibly meet the needs of a student if you don't know what's in the IEP.
Right.
I had a student this year who didn't have an IEP, but everybody thought she was behind and she couldn't learn. And I just remember that because I would do random stuff, because this year I taught pre-K. So I would do random stuff like colors in Spanish and do a song like, if you're wearing rojo, please stand up if you know you're wearing rojo. Every time I said a color in Spanish that she had on, she got up. What's that tell me? She knows the colors in Spanish.
Right.
Now, this is a student that I would let go sit in the library with a book during circle time. Because A, that kept her occupied instead of just sitting, even though circle time wasn't really that long. But B, it also avoided any type of disruption. But what's happening is she's sitting there looking through the books, but she's also retaining what she's hearing. And so I did the same thing with the alphabet one day. We had a circle time rug that had letters on it. And I would call a student's name and say, can you stand on letter whatever? And then I asked them, give me the letter, sound, and words that start with it. And she was able to do it as well. So prior teachers would say she didn't have letter recognition down. And I just remember talking to her mom. This is like a proud teacher moment. I'm actually going to shout her mom out. Shout out to Katrina. And I remember telling her, this girl knows her letters and letter sounds, and she also knows her colors in Spanish. She's been playing the game, and she was like, I know she does it at home too. This is how I know what you're teaching her, because she does it at home. I just find it very interesting drawing the correlation between previous teachers saying she's not catching on to actually seeing it, where she is kind of like I was as a child. You can't just ask me something and I give it to you. You got to work for it. And so given a fun activity where she can kind of do something that she likes and then say, oh, I'm wearing that color, I can jump up and down. Let me stand up so I can jump up and down. that's meeting her where she was, but also
Right.
giving me the opportunity to, like you said, write down those observations so I can give her mom that, because you had that long day at work and you come pick your child up. Ain't nothing like getting a good report. You know, there's nothing like getting a good report to help in your stressful day from work. So I just wanted to share that. And speaking of that, it reminds me of legacy. So, what legacy do you want to leave behind for your students, the community you serve, and your family?
I think my biggest legacy is just saying that I cared. I gave my all. And I say that because I was in a school district that was very challenging for me from the beginning of school till the end of school. So for 9 10 months, it was extremely challenging. And I endured every bit of it. And I got up and I still went to work every single day. And I remember my sister about it, and she's like, why don't you just quit? She said, because they're putting you through too much. And I was like, what you have to understand is that if I quit, I'm walking out on the students. It's not about what I'm going through with the individuals that I'm going through it with, which was my admin, but it was more so about going in there and being consistent. And I made a commitment, and my commitment was not to my admin. My commitment was to these students. You know,
Right.
it was this first that I made the commitment to. Then I made the commitment to the parents. I say, so walking out, I have just broke a commitment that I said I was going to do or keep or put into place. Because when I signed that contract, my contract asked me if I could teach these students. Yes, I can. My way of teaching may not be the next teacher way of teaching. Why? Because when I came through school, we had teachers that cared. You did not leave out of second grade going to third grade and you cannot read. You
Right.
know, that was my tactic when I taught my boys. My children learned how to read playing dominoes, cards, and dice. Old school way. I was not going out and spend $200 or $300 on a technology device, whereas I could have went to the dollar store and got the same simple things and well educated, you know. And I like the fact that we have brought technology into education, but I also frown upon it because I have and have had students in my secondary level where I taught intermediate that literally could not write a paragraph on paper, you know. And so I think that they've been robbed of education when we put technology in, which to me has become a barrier. And I know we have the pre and post COVID. So of course,
Mm-hmm.
COVID matter, which was about a span of maybe 2 years, we went technology wise. And so upon coming out of the COVID, which is the post-COVID, instead of blending in both paper and technology, it all stayed converted towards technology, which has really robbed these students, you know, of a true learning and knowing how to go and write a paragraph and knowing that a paragraph consists of complete sentences that begin with a capital letter, you know, even with their name. And I tell my students, please write your name on your paper. And I would have students that would write their first name starting with a lowercase letter. And I'm like, that is not how
Mm-hmm.
we write our name. Both first and last name begin with a capital letter. You know, I have worked with individuals that have been in the 8th grade. And to be honest with you, my grandson, one of them that is in 3rd grade, could write better than my students that are in the 8th grade. You know, so I do believe technology has robbed our students of the great understanding and the education that they truly need. And again, don't get me wrong, I am grateful that they blended technology in, because when I came through school, we didn't have Chromebooks. Everything was pen
No.
and paper. We learned,
No.
we understood what a paragraph was and how many sentences it consists of and what punctuation to use at the end of a sentence, whereas these students now don't get that, you know. So I truly say that the legacy that I want to leave out for these students is this: knowing that I cared, and I'm gonna always give 200+%, and I'm not doing the bare minimum, because at this point in my life, I can very well take a different job where I don't have to go and deal with someone else's child because all my children are grown. But I choose environment because there is a lack of a lot of things that goes into education that these students are not getting. And of course, when you have a teacher that comes in or an educator that comes in like myself, that think back when I came through school, I'm gonna make sure my students, when they leave my classroom, that they have learned something. You now get it to where parents get upset. Oh, my child don't do homework, and you know, things of that sort. Now I have always kept in the mind that education is a three-way street. It's the teacher, the parent, and the student.
Yeah.
You know, cannot come in and balance things out. Then this student will leave my classroom, no matter what level they're in, going to the next grade level and can't read. can't comprehend. So then I have failed that student because I didn't put my all into it. And so that's where I'm at with, leaving that legacy, knowing that I put a 200+% in to make sure when that student leave out of Miss Smith's classroom, they have learned something. Whether they remember Miss Smith by being that mean teacher or Miss Smith by being that teacher that gave a care, I want them to remember when I was in Miss Smith's classroom, she was going to make sure that I knew something that could help me thrive and graduate before I left out.
Wow, that's important. I'm not even going to try to top that. What's next for you?
I have to honestly say, what I believe is going to be next for me, and I'm putting God in place of this and following the pattern or the footsteps that He's ordering for me. My journey is one to, again, assess and identify the learning disabilities at an early age, and not allowing these students to go through, pre-K all the way up to high school, and they're just not identifying that disability because why? Nobody cared. Nobody cared. And it was just a pass them on, pass them on, pass them on, instead of saying, this student truly do not or cannot connect in this area. Can we please get a referral in and get them checked? If it's no more than saying, hey, mom, I've seen this here at school. What are you seeing at home? And try to connect those dots to be able to have students on all hands between the teacher and the parent,
Yes.
get what they need and not allow them to go through the education system and then come out and they still don't have it, have it there. If it's as much as just like with my students, filling out an application for a job. Didn't realize that my students literally had no idea what to put in on the application. So we're going point by point, filling out this application. We get to the end and I'm like, okay, sign your name. And they literally go in there and write their name. And I'm like, yes, we have a lot of work to do in the education system moving from this point forward.
As you were saying that, I just thought about this year. I spoke to a colleague about how my students do write the room. And I taught pre-K. There's pre-K 1 and pre-K 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I am of the belief that students will go as far as you take them.
Right.
So you're talking about writing your name and writing uppercase first letter and the rest lowercase. I had students come to me that did not know how to write their name. You're coming into pre-K and you don't even know the first letter in your name. Like, there's just certain things that I thought about. And so the first letter I teach you at the beginning of the year is first letter in your name. Then we move on. But to see, telling a teacher that I had my students doing write the room, and she said, you don't have anything up. She meant I didn't write words and put them up around the room. Now, sometimes I would do that with words and letters and numbers, and sometimes I didn't. My kids, because we did it so much and they enjoyed it, they didn't need me to put anything up. They would literally write their environment. That is what write the room is. But it's so interesting that I'm getting to the point of teachers are not doing because they don't know.
Right.
There is things that you learn when you go to school and you take your certification test that they want you to know. But there are some things are taught and some things are caught.
Right.
And there are some things as an educator that you have to catch in order to be an effective educator. And there are some teachers who either are not catching it because they're missing it, and there's some that unfortunately just don't care. This is not a field for the paycheck. This is not a field you get into for the paycheck.
I do agree.
Because this is going to be a field that will have you self-destruct if you are in it for the paycheck. So if you do not have a passion, this is a PSA. If you don't have a passion for education and you are in it, you might want to rethink your life choices.
Right.
Do you have any final words of encouragement for the viewing audience today?
I would just say, for everyone, whether you're a parent or a neighbor or anyone, as I heard you say earlier, it takes a village to raise a child. I would just say let's rebuild that village and keep moving forward, because these children need support on all levels from anyone who can give them that support, who can encourage them to keep going, keep thriving, because we don't know what happens outside of the school setting. So to me, it's not just about the school setting, because I see a lot of my students out in public, and I'm still giving that positive, pushing them up and pulling up and, encouraging them. So I would just say we need to think about rebuilding that village and helping these children on all levels to be successful.
Phenomenal. Well, I'm not going to hold you because we got a podcast interview later on today, and I strategically wasn't trying to make this be long for you. I thank you so much, Marty, for your yes. I thank you for your commitment. I thank you for your passion. I thank you for your level of expertise. And I thank you for serving the community that you serve and doing what you do. And it is my prayer that you continue to flourish and that you keep moving forward, even beyond those hurdles and those pushbacks that we tend to get as educators within the education system. So without further ado, thank you so much for coming. I want to thank the viewing audience that is viewing now and that will view later on, post us actually recording this live. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your interest. I thank you for logging on. I thank you, Dr. Alicia, who is one of our co-authors who logged on. And I just want you guys to know that I do have a special. We have our third volume of the Educators Rise Wishes to Change the DEI Impact Anthology, Bridging the Gaps Volume 3. That is the third book of the series. That is going to be launching at our second annual in-person conference, the Educators Rise Conference and Award Ceremony. This will take place on Saturday, July 18th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Exton, Pennsylvania at the Hilton Garden Inn Hotel. It is a beautiful hotel. They just renovated it, and it's been less than a year since they've renovated. They just opened their doors back up in January. I have something for you. For the first 10 people to go and register for the conference, you won't just be registering for a seat. You will get a free autographed copy of one of the volumes of the book. So if you are interested in that, you can find information either in the cards, or you can go to educatorsriseenterprises.com, or you can email me at educatorsrise@gmail.com, or you can DM me. The first 10 people will get that free book, and it'll be autographed. So I thank you guys again for coming. Remember, when educators rise, students and communities are able to rise, and futures also can rise. Until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep rising. God bless you. Thank you.